You'll see yourself on here.
Questions on two different.
Starting
Okay.
to join. Just 1 second while we get Odie.
You'll.
Hello.
Okay. There you go.
Hey, Odie.
Hey,
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
yeah, but you're not in the picture. You have to
It's
be in the
okay.
Should I
picture.
move a little
No.
bit
Yes,
further
back.
back?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Back is good. Back is better.
I can't see any
You'll-
of the happy little faces then. That's
Yeah,
okay.
actually, I
We're gonna-
can't really either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you,
So we can spin it back and forth, maybe a little bit.
How do I do this?
You lean in.
No, we're gonna have to move it back and forth. You and I can't occupy that space. It's too narrow for two people. Yeah.
Okay. You're on first.
We're just watching people coming in, so it's good to see. We see some old friends already. Some Oregonians showing up. Are you able to see, Odie, that the scrolling individuals who are joining?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So we're just watching as people join. California contingent is coming on. Midwesterners joining. Hi, everybody. Hi.
Kan ik nu ook can I send a
A heart or something?
a heart?
Oh, that was good.
Oh,
That's good. There's hearts flying, Odie. I don't know if you're sending hearts or other people are. Hi, everybody. Good
Yes.
afternoon, everyone.
that.
So
I never did
I
this
saw one
before, you
Facebook
know.
Live one time, and the person who was doing it had hearts going back and forth continuously the whole time. And so nobody did that on our first Facebook Live, but if you guys can send the love, that's good. Thank you, Veronica. So we're still waiting for people to join. Hi, Carlos. So Penny and I are here in Oregon. Odie is in Europe. Maybe, are you in Germany or are you back in the Netherlands now?
No, yes, I'm back in the Netherlands. I'm in Groningen.
Yeah.
I'm
Thank
just
you.
back from the family meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that note, Janice. Yeah. Should we wait a little bit or are people on? Looks like there's maybe 17, 18 people on. Is that going to be good? Maybe we'll give you another minute or two. How's that? So we received your questions. Thanks to everybody who submitted them. We have 2 pages of questions, maybe 3 pages of questions. And what we're going to do is, it's okay. It's okay. What we're going to do is try to address them individually. And if you have additional questions, either as we're going or afterwards. Hi, Carlos and Gustavo, all the way from the DR. We will be happy to try and answer those questions as well. We're going to try and stick to 1 hour. So let's see how we're doing. Hi, folks from Australia. Odie, you should feel free to jump in anytime. So Penny is here with me, but because of the way we have the iPad oriented, there's only one of us in the view. So you'll get to see, hi Trevor, you'll get to see Penny. She'll be addressing some of the questions that are specific to her expertise. Okay, so I'm getting encouraged to get going. I want to start off by, first of all, I was thinking about having a giant mug of something caffeinated with 1,000% caffeine in it that I could show you that we are, all three of us, Odie, Penny, myself, and our respective teams are working more or less around the clock on this project. We're really, we're driving hard. We've been trying to stay in good communication with you so you know what's happening. It's sometimes hard to keep you updated as we like to, but so it's good to be having this Facebook Live and trying to answer your questions directly. I thought the best way to start maybe was to talk a little bit about what we think is going on at a very basic level in causing PCAN, because it helps you understand what we think, how we think about COASY and how it might be able to help. And that's sort of a lead up to the clinical trial. So my current thinking about PCAN, and Odie, feel free to jump in here as well. So there's a chemical problem in the cells. Your body is made up of cells. Most of your cells do just fine without, with the PCAN problem, without pantothenate kinase 2, but there's a small set of cells in your brain that absolutely positively need it in order to be healthy. And when they don't have it, they are sick. And they get sicker. They aren't dead, they're there, but they get sicker and sicker and sicker over time. So when you're born, those cells are probably mostly okay. But as you get older into childhood, depending on whether you have the fast classic disease or the slower atypical disease, the disease process, the sickness of those cells is happening either at a faster rate or at a slower rate. So the cells are becoming more, they're accumulating damage. You can kind of think of it as there's a primary problem, the pantothenate kinase problem, and then there's all sorts of secondary problems that happen when the cell just doesn't, it's kind of sickly. So it might get problems with sugar metabolism, it might have problems with oxygen, other kinds of things. Those accumulate over time. And as the cell gets sicker, the question is, how far does it go before we can bring it back? And we don't know the answer to that question. So that's part of the question. If we can fix that primary problem, if we can make the primary PCAN problem, the chemical problem, go away, now there's no more accumulating problems. There's no more kind of ongoing chemical problem with from the pantothenate kinase problem. But all the other collateral damage is still there. And the question is, how much can the cell recover? We think that COASY can fix that primary problem. It can make the chemistry work properly. But with all of the damage that has occurred, we don't know how much the brain cells have an ability to recover themselves. And it's probably different if the disease has been going on for a few years versus if it's been going on for many decades. It's probably a function of whether it's the fast form or the slower form. All of those kinds of things make a difference. And so that makes it very difficult for us to make a prediction about how much function might be recovered, whether anything will be recovered at all. We just don't know. So many of you know me to be an optimistic person. In the absence of having answers to things, I tend to take an optimistic view, trying not to be too unrealistic, but I try to stay positive. And I think that in the absence of knowing, why not try and stay positive? We do know that the mice don't walk around and look sick. The mice walk around and look like regular mice. But we also know that they have a chemical problem in their brain that is just like the chemical problem in the human brain. And everything that we want to be able to see in the mouse from COASY, showing us that it's a promising compound, we are seeing. And so that's why we're as excited about this work as we are. Okay, so that was my lead-in. we are uncertain of the capacity for the brain to heal. And that's the question many of you want to know, is how much healing can happen, and we just don't know. You and your kids and your family members are going to teach us the answer to that question. We also thought it would be helpful to give a little bit of an orientation to clinical trials, and since that's Penny's expertise, I'm going to turn this over to her.
Hi, everyone. Good to see all those faces online. So what I wanted to do, because I think it answers some of the questions that were asked about what's going to happen in this clinical trial, I thought it would be helpful to explain a little bit about how clinical trials have to be done. So when you have a new compound that you want to test in humans with a disease, usually the regulatory authorities want you to test it first in healthy people who don't have the disease. Now, we, as of information today, September 24th or 25th, depending on where you're listening, as of today, we have been given indications that we do not have to do a study in healthy people before we go into PCAN patients, people with PCAN. And that's very good news, because had we been told we had to do a study in healthy people, we probably would be looking at a full year before we could start doing clinical trials in people with PCAN. So that's very good news. So we are able to go straight into people with PCAN. This is what's called a phase 2 study. And there are generally 3 phases before a compound goes to market. We don't know if we will have to also do a phase 3 study, but let me tell you what a phase 2 study is, because that's the clinical trial that we're talking about here. A phase 2 study's goal is, by definition, has to have as its primary purpose assessing the safety of a compound. How safe is it when you give it to people with PCAN? How well tolerated is it? Does it cause side effects? Does it cause any nausea or problems like that? Does it cause side effects? So that is the primary goal of this study. Now, of course, we want to see over the course of 2 years, which is how long the study is planned to be, we want to see if it helps the symptoms of PCAN. But that is not the primary goal of this study. And that's by requirement of the regulatory authorities. The primary goal out of the box has to be to assess safety. And so I want you all to kind of remember that as we talk about the answers to some of these questions. There was some questions about what has to be completed before the clinical trial can begin. So again, this is as of today. We have to finish making the very pure batch that will go into people with PCAN. This has to be made in a very specific way with very tight controls. And that is ongoing right now. It's happening because you have helped us to fundraise that we were able to start that work. The stuff is being made right now, and it is the first batch that will be used in the clinical trials. That is going just as fast as it can. We've asked the question of the chemical synthesis company, if we could give you more money, could it go faster? Which I think is on a lot of people's minds. And basically the answer we got is, it is just going as fast as it possibly can at this point. And us simply throwing more money at it, it can't make it go any faster. The chemistry is just happening as fast as it can happen. So that is underway. Once we have that first batch, or the first part of the first batch, we have to find out whether it is stable, both as a chemical and also when it is put into the grape flavored or apple flavored goo that it's going to be used to give Coazy to people with PCAN. So there's 2 so-called shelf life studies that have to be done. They can happen in parallel. So we will be testing the stability of the chemical, and we'll be testing the stability of the chemical in solution, in grape flavored or apple flavored gel. Those studies, the plan for those studies is going to the regulatory agencies very shortly, and they will tell us if what we are proposing is adequate. If we're proposing to study stability for long enough, too long, how soon during the stability studies we can start the clinical trial. That's a very important step. So then as soon as we get the stuff, we will start doing stability studies. The FDA and the other regulatory authorities will tell us how long before we can start the clinical trial, how much data we have to have.
So maybe I can just make a comment that we've built in our planning, we have built in the time that we think it's going to take for the shelf life study, but there are unknowns along the way, and one of the unknowns is how stable will this be? And so that's one of those things where if it's super stable, we're not going to need a very long time, and if it's unstable, we may need a little bit longer to do it. So there are things that we just can't know today, and that's one of those. So Penny mentioned that it's a flavored compound. We do know that some of your kids have G-tubes, and it can go down a G-tube. We've designed it specifically so that it can be used in a G-tube. None of that work to get it into a formulation is slowing us down. So that's something that we've directly considered.
And then the other piece that we are actually working on right now is setting up all of the, for want of a better term, the infrastructure, the pieces that have to be in place in order to run a clinical trial. So we are going to be building the database into which you and we will be entering data. We will be designing the forms that we'll use to collect the data. We'll be figuring out the shipping details, working with our pharmacy to work out the processes for the material to go from the place that is turning it into grape and apple flavored gel to the pharmacy to ship it. And so all of those things have got to be, the fine details have got to be worked out. So that's all going on right now while the chemical is being made, so that we're not held up. We're not waiting for that to be delivered in order for us to figure it out. We're actively planning that right now.
Can you talk about the run-in a little bit in that context?
Yeah, so something that we are considering asking your help for. So perhaps if you've read a little bit about the study on our website, that we are planning on measuring a biomarker. This is a marker in the blood that gives us some sense of whether CoAZ is doing what we think it's going to do, whether it's fixing the chemical problem. We have just a limited number of blood samples from many of you over time on which to base our plans around that. And we are considering asking you to do what's called a run-in study, where there's no drug ready to distribute yet, but we will be asking you for blood samples on a set schedule. So this would be maybe 2 or 3 blood draws over the course of several months. We would send you kits. We would make arrangements for how the blood would get drawn in your local community. You would send the blood back to us. That would really help us in our planning for the clinical trial. It also has a very important function to test our proposed system for getting blood draws during the trial itself, when your children will actually be getting CoAZ. We want to know that that process is going to work smoothly. It sounds like the simplest thing in the world, right? To send you a kit, you go get a blood draw, you send the blood back. A million things can go wrong with it. And so we want to sort of test the system before we're in the high stakes world of a clinical trial. And so we may be reaching out to you in the coming month or so to see if any of you would be interested and willing to participate in that, at least those of you that are in North America. So
maybe I can give Penny a little bit of a break here. Odie, do you have anything you want to throw into the mix here?
No.
Okay. Odie and I are not clinical trialists. We're work more in the laboratory, and so even though I take care of kids with PCAN, I'm not so used to the clinical trial world. But the good news is that Penny lives and breathes clinical trials. She's been trained to do this specially, and she's leading this work. So we're in good hands. I wanted to talk just a little bit. Some questions were asked about some of the money that's been raised, whether we've spent it all. No, we haven't spent it all. You guys have been doing absolutely amazing work here in the U.S., in Europe, for spoonbill and for Lepilar. It's been you're really impressive. So we're very impressed with you. We've not spent all the money. We're being very good and thoughtful stewards of the money. We are very attentive to the amount of work that it went to generate this kind of funding. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we've been spending the money on, and then it's also you're going to hear as I tell you that it's also things that we will be in the future spending the money on. So we still have a fair amount of money in the bank, literally, but it's been promised for various things. Do we have enough money today to get us all the way there? Not all the way through the clinical trial, but we did just get another $50,000 grant, which is in our world a small grant, but that will help with the biomarker work. We've been spending the money on figuring out how to make high purity CoAZ in large batches. We've been making it, right? We spent your hard-earned money to make this first batch. We've been spending it on biomarker development, stability studies, a secure database, the actual clinical trial, right? Enabling everyone in North America to join the trial who wants to, and then, of course, very importantly, trials outside of North America. So we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But the funding that you've raised has enabled us, without having to stop or slow down, has enabled us to go at every step of the way when we're ready to. So thank you for your partnership. Someone asked about our ideas for maximizing year-end charitable giving, and our response back to you is we'll do anything you tell us that we can do to help, but you got to figure that out. We got a little too much work on our hands already, and we can't be the ones driving that. Do you want to answer some of the questions, Penny, around the enrollment criteria and if people with idiopathic NVIA?
So I just want to give one example of a financial decision that we had to make in order to to be the best stewards of your money, but also to keep things moving as fast as possible. So when we're designing a shelf life study, we have to choose what kind of container the CoAZ is going to go into when we ship it to you. Is it going to be glass? Is it going to be plastic? Is it going to be something else? And there's a lot of thinking that goes into that we're not experts in, but we have shelf life experts helping us with that. And so that we didn't make a wrong decision, we've decided to sort of test stability in multiple different types of containers so that we don't find out, for instance, that it's not very stable in plastic and then have to start another study to test it in glass. And so we're spending a bit more money now to be able to do everything in parallel rather than do it stepwise and slow us down. So that's an example of how we are trying to make good decisions for how best to spend the money while speeding things along as quickly as possible. So there were some specific questions about during the trial itself. So one of the questions was, how will the dose be determined? So it is determined by weight, basically. The weight of the person with PCAN determines the dose, and so it will vary from one person to another, and it may vary during the trial. When we have a child that is gaining weight or conversely losing weight, we'll need to get regular updates on weight in order to make sure the dosing is accurate.
Inclusion,
Yeah, there were some questions about who can be included in the trial and who would be excluded from the trial. So basically what you need to know is that we have designed this study to be as broadly inclusive as possible. There are very, very few things that would exclude you from the clinical trial. So age, there are very limited age restrictions. The only restriction is on the very, very young child who might need to be drinking formula, infant formula, because the FDA has some strict rules around that. And we're not aware of any child below the age of 2, but if there were, we'd figure that out. So basically, age is not a restriction. There were questions about whether people with a history of cancer would be excluded, and in principle, no. We'd need to get medical history, but that shouldn't exclude you. There were questions about adjustments to deep brain stimulator settings and about adjustments to meds during the trial, whether that would be a problem. No, we will want to know about them in some detail, but they won't result in your being excluded from the trial. There are no particular meds that would result in exclusion, but very, very important, you cannot be in 2 trials that are testing the same sort of principle, that are aiming to try to replace what is missing. And so a specific question came in about the studies of REO24, and if you are in the REO24 trial, you cannot be in the COASY trial. I can't speak to what the retrophing company would say if you were in the COASY trial, but we would ask that you do not try to dually enroll, primarily because it would not be safe. We have very real concerns that having 2 compounds that are aiming to fix the deficit in PCAN would be a very bad thing. And so for your own child's safety, for your own safety, if you are a person with PCAN, you can really not enroll in both studies. You cannot take both compounds. Neither party wants that to be the case. So anything else about that you'd like to say? There was a question about how often blood draws will need to be done. So it's 9 or 10 times over the course of 2 years. It is a little more frequent at the beginning of the study, and then it spreads out to every 3 to 6 months. And where will the blood draws be done? We are trying to make this as simple a study as possible. Our goal is that you should be able to do this clinical trial in your own home, at least for the North American participants. We want everything to be done locally in the person's own community. So we will make arrangements for a local blood draw. We will send you kits. We will send you mailers to return the blood. We will try to make it as easy as possible for you to participate. We'll work with your local provider if that is an option, and if not, we will find a laboratory near you that can do the blood draws.
Maybe I can just make a comment. Some questions that came in just about eligibility. So you have to have a diagnosis of PCAN, meaning you have to have 2 mutations, and you can't be a little tiny baby. But if you're only showing some mild symptoms or maybe even no symptoms, I wouldn't see that as a problem for enrolling somebody in the trial. So how long do you have to be off of, quote, the other drug? If that's REO24, we don't have an answer for you today, but we'll talk to the community about that as we're nearing for this clinical trial. So you want to go back to
so
how will the data be stored?
Yeah, so how will the data be stored securely was a question. So it is in what's called a Part 11 compliant system. Many of you have heard of HIPAA, which is this privacy and security law that came into effect to protect health-related data. So we are using a database that is basically exceeds the highest standards that are required of a clinical trial. Our goal is to make it a very secure database and to do this to the highest standards possible. There was a question about, will anything be tracked by local doctors? Not formally as part of the study, but we welcome all input. We're happy to work with a local provider to the extent possible. We will ask you questions, ask you to continue completing PCAN Ready, to give us information about new medical problems as they come along and any side effects or problems with CoAZ. And we will ask that you complete phone calls or Skypes or emails with us on a scheduled basis, and that you get blood draws done on a regular basis. Other than that, that's basically what we're going to ask of you.
Yeah, so we're trying to keep it simple and safe. So there's some questions about, some of you know we've been trying to develop a biomarker for PCAN. That is something that we can measure in the body that without taking a measure of the brain, which we can't do so easily, right? If there's a way to measure something in the body that will tell us how the brain is different in a person with PCAN. And so it's still experimental. We're exploring this. It will be part of the clinical trial, but we don't know as of today precisely how. So we're trying to develop or discover and develop biomarkers while we are moving the CoAZ work forward. We've got some tantalizing ideas from the mouse, but they're not gonna make or break the clinical trial. Yeah, so most of the focus of this trial, as you know, is on safety. That's key. But of course, we're all interested also in seeing how the kids do and adults do on the compound. So that's going to be you telling us how your family is doing.
Just to think about blinding.
Yeah. So let me just tell you what I understand about blinding, and then Penny can jump in. So we're asked questions. How will I know? Can you tell us if our child was on placebo? Those kinds of things. One of the basic and very important tenets of doing a trial like this is this idea of blinding. So Penny and I won't know, Odie won't know the status of individual people. Somebody else who is a physician will know, so that they can monitor and be sure that everything is safe and done as it needs to be. But we won't know for your individual child. You can ask us until the cows come home, but the truth is we simply do not know the status of your child, and we actually don't know that until the end of the trial. It's a very important tenet of how to do this. We've been very deliberate about stacking the odds that your kids don't get placebo, right? So 3 of 4 of them are on active compound, and only 1 of 4 is on placebo.
Just for 6 months.
And that's just for 6 months, and then they go on to the what's called open label, where everybody is getting the CoAZ. It's very important that this trial be done in that way, so that we prove to ourselves, to you, and to the regulatory authorities that this is safe and is showing the effects. The trial duration is 2 years. It's 6 months of the blinded phase and 18 months of the open label. Yeah, you want to jump in?
So just one other point about blinding, because I know a lot of you are frustrated with the idea of there being a placebo even for 6 months. But most of you know that people with PCAN, especially children with PCAN, can get sick. And that can happen like that. It can be very severe. I know that we have some people online who have been dealing with that just front and center. It's part of your daily life right now, this minute, how sick your child can get because of pecan. And unless we have a placebo group, we aren't going to know, did the child get sick because they started on Coase, or did they get sick because of pecan? And those are the kinds of things that, unless you do a placebo-controlled phase to a clinical trial, part of a clinical trial with a placebo in, there's a very real risk that the compound would never be approved for use, because we'd have no way of sorting out whether it's the compound that's making them sick or it's the disease that is making them sick. And so I hope that that might give you some sense of the reason to do a placebo phase. We want to get this to you ultimately after this trial. We want it to be widely available if it does what we are hoping it will do. But we've got to know that it is safe and that there's no difference between the safety of it when it's the active stuff versus when it's the placebo being given. So I hope that makes sense.
Data analysis?
Yeah, so again, because we're blinded, we will, one thing I should say is that we will tell you at the end of the study, so after the 2 years of the clinical trial, we will tell every participant whether for the first 6 months they or their child were on placebo or were on Coase. We will tell you after the end of the study what the first 6 months was for your child. We won't know that until after the end of the study, however. We also won't know information about the biomarker until after the end of the study. And so the data, all of the data from the clinical trial will be analyzed in the months following the end of the study, and it will be published on aggregate, in aggregate, meaning, you know, the overall results. We are not going to, because we won't frankly have the means to be able to do this, to be able to sit down and talk with you one-on-one about, you know, your study, your child's biomarker profile during the study. That's just not the way this works. But we will gladly talk with you about how you think your kid did during the course of the study. We're hoping to be able to go seamlessly from a clinical trial into more widely availability of Coase, but it depends how the clinical trial goes. That's one of those things that we just can't answer yet. Those were some questions that came in.
So, Carol Carter, I see that you're not able to get the stream, so you're probably not hearing what I'm saying, but I'm going to tell you that we can talk offline if that would be helpful. If others have questions afterwards, we also can help try and answer questions. So many of you are not in North America, and we know that you have a burning question, which is, when's it coming? And we know that that is a critical question for you, and we don't have an answer for you today. As we have been exploring the fastest route in North America, we also are exploring the fastest route in Europe. Odie and the Dutch team are working on that. We're working on that along with them. We're looking at it in other countries as well, including Australia and other countries. We don't have an answer for you yet, but Penny's put forward the concept, and I think it's one to remember, that one of the things we think can make this go faster in other countries is actually getting started in the US, because sometimes other countries will follow the lead in the US, at least when it comes to these regulatory areas. And so we think that if it's a rolling trial somewhere, that will carry some weight with the authorities in other countries. So understand that we're working on this, and we don't have an answer for you in specific countries, but as we make progress in understanding what the regulatory landscape is, we'll keep you informed. What else? Yeah, what else can we tell you? We have a little bit of time left. We can take real-time questions at the risk of, yeah. Odie, is there anything else you want to say to the group?
No, so we are talking in the beginning of October with an authority in Brussels, and who can explain us more about the legislation in Europe. But as what you explained already, if it is approved, or in the United States, it will definitely speed up approval in Europe. So
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, but we have to find the right person. Yeah.
So the time frame that we put out on the Spoonbill Facebook page was that we think that the trial will begin in early 2019. So some of the challenges with the synthesis pushed us ahead a little bit, but we think that that's a realistic time frame, and so that's what we're thinking about now. Question: if the benefits are obvious from the start, could we stop the placebo and go directly to the compound? In theory, that may be the case, but I'm going to tell you that I think it's a stretch for us to be seeing that kind of a dramatic change, because think about what's happening in the body, in the cells of a person with the disease. We might be able to stop the fast moving train of pecan, but getting it turned around and going in the other direction, and then clearing out all of the problems that have accumulated, that's going to take some time. Will it happen in 6 months? I think that that's very, very unlikely. But again, we won't know until we're doing the trial. We do have a safety monitor who's also looking at who's not blinded and knows who's on and who's off the compound, and they may be able to say if there's some change in how we're doing the trial that's needed. So we're talking early 19 here. How long until we can see it in other countries? I'd love to be able to give you an answer. We do not know. We just don't know yet. As soon as we can. As soon as we can.
Yeah, that's hard to estimate.
Yeah. Other questions that we can help with?
Some groups might have opted to keep very low profile and not say a word about this until we actually were launching a clinical trial. And we've wondered, would that have been better? Because we've told you kind of what we're up to in real time, and I think that has built this anticipation and excitement. But it's also a source of frustration for you all that, it's not here today, but we felt on balance it was better to bring you in as a community to kind of let you know our own trials and tribulations as we've gone through this. I will say that most clinical trials take what we have done in 2 years, takes most clinical trials 6 years and about $318 million to do. And so for us to be where we are today, it may be, meaningless to you and your kid, but please know that we are really working as fast as we possibly can. And we have actually kind of sped through a lot of steps that in industry, in pharmaceutical industry land, would have taken and have taken a whole lot longer to achieve. And so we're going as fast as we can, people.
So 2 questions came in, both really good ones. Is this a first of its kind trial? And it is, actually. The NIH is, and the FDA, but the NIH is really interested in this as a model for a rare disease trial. It doesn't require that people fly all over the world to get to 1 or 2 places where the study is going on, particularly for a disorder where that kind of trial, that kind of travel seems to be particularly challenging. I'm just going back to the other question. There was a good question about neuroplasticity, and let me just explain to you a little bit. That might not be a term that's familiar to everybody, but that means kind of how able the brain is to respond to injury and recover and grow and learn, those kinds of things. That differs by your age. So if you're a little kid, you've got lots and lots of capacity, and never underestimate the brain of a little child. Kids can heal from things that adults can't heal from, and that kids have an amazing amount of ability to recover the function in their brain. And so a younger child, even a younger child with PCAN, has more capacity than somebody old and gray. And so that's an important factor in this. How fast the disease is going, how long the disease has been there, how young or old the person is. Those are all factors that are to be considered in how things will go. Yeah. Other questions that we can answer? I see you're talking a lot to each other, which is great.
For those of you that have asked, no, we're not vulnerable to bribes. It makes no difference. If we could deliver this tomorrow, we would. But
so let me just sorry. I'm just trying to.
Somebody has asked a question about compassionate use. Not a specific question, but has just brought that up. So compassionate use is a term that is used when someone is not eligible for a clinical trial. So when a person can't get access to the drug because they're not eligible, there is a mechanism in the FDA to apply for compassionate use. Basically, we have set this trial up so that within the limits of, the fact that it's the FDA that is regulating it, there's nobody that is going to be excluded from the clinical trial. In the vast majority of clinical trials, if you're somebody with advanced disease who can't travel to a clinical center, who has a whole host of other medical problems, you would be excluded from the clinical trial. Our study is set up so that there's virtually nobody that is going to be excluded. And so the compassionate use question sort of becomes moot. It's not really that anybody is likely to be excluded.
So there's a question about might it be too late for some of our kids, and I want to take a run at that one. So some of your kids are very late in the stages of the disease. They have lost most of their function. There still is, I mean, I've seen this disease go on for many, many years and decades. There still is, at the level of the brain anatomy and the cells of the brain, there is still more to be lost, I can tell you that. Will any kind of an intervention be able to bring those kids back or help them recover? Again, we don't know the answer to this question, but I do think that the basic idea that the further a child is in disease, the farther their disabilities, the greater their disabilities are, the more substantial loss of function that they have had, it will be harder for them to regain. But the younger ones may have the ability to regain some function. We just don't know. We won't know that until your kids teach us the answer to that question. There's a good question here. Is the pure co-AZ formula easier to make than mixing it? No, it's actually just as easy. So we want you to understand, we're not delaying the trial for 2 months to make sure it tastes good or that, we are using the right flavors. We're just trying to make it something that actually tastes decent, because why wouldn't you? It's a simple thing to do.
And because it only requires tiny amounts.
Yeah.
So that's not a reason.
Yeah. So one of the things that's cool about this compound that I think is different from some of the other compounds being tested is that we're going with the tiniest amount that you can use, and most people we think are going to need just a really small amount, and so putting it in a flavored liquid was the easiest way to get you an accurate amount of the compound. So we're kind of coming round on the hour. If there's any more burning questions, we can take them. So somebody asked, what's the next step? Next step for you or next step for us? The next step for us, we have weekly meetings together. This is the COASY group. We have regular meetings with our partners beyond just the Dutch and American teams. So we know what our next steps are. We're working on things in the laboratory. We're working on things in Europe. We're working on things elsewhere in the world to try and get the compound moving forward. What's next for you? You've been amazing with fundraising. I would encourage you to continue. That's again been able to get us to where we are now. If we ask for your help with the run-in study, with the practice blood draws, that would be great to also see the community rise to that occasion, which I know you will. Other steps, Odie, are there other steps you can think of to ask people to take? Penny? Not specifically, that's it. We as painful as it is to ask for, I'll ask for your patience, because we know you're not patient. We're not patient either, but it helps us to know that you have confidence in us, that we are going as fast as we can. That's been a basic tenet of this all along, so just understand that. Maybe what we'll do is wrap up on that point then. You want to say your goodbyes to people?
Yeah, thanks to everybody.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
We love you all.
Yeah, thank you, Odie, for getting up in the middle of the night.
Seeing all these people flying across the top of the screen,
Yeah.
and thanks to Odie for joining us in the middle of her night.
Yeah, so there were 23 people on, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, we appreciate you all taking the time. So stay in touch, okay? Bye-bye.
Bye.